Are you kidding me? I'm a doctor. I work here. I'm literally wearing my hospital ID.
Buddy, at this point, I don't care. You are coming with me.
It's because I'm black. That's why you don't care to even check my badge.
Maybe. Go ahead and slowly turn around and put your hands behind your back.
So you're arresting a doctor in his own workplace without...
It started as an ordinary Wednesday evening at Harborview Medical Center, but for Dr. Andrew Bennett, it would become a nightmare. He was walking briskly down the main corridor toward the emergency department, white coat flowing, stethoscope swinging, hospital ID clipped to his chest, displaying his name and title. Dr. Andrew Bennett, attending physician, emergency medicine. Nothing unusual. Just a doctor heading to his shift. But Officer Rebecca Stanton saw him differently. In her mind, a black man in scrubs must be questioned. Someone like him couldn't just walk through hospital corridors without scrutiny. Stanton's hypervigilance had a name in her reports, protecting the hospital from imposters. But in reality, it was bias dressed up as duty. Andrew's thoughts were on the night's patients. 2 trauma cases had come in earlier, and he hoped he had time for a quick coffee before chaos hit. He smiled at a passing nurse and nodded at a resident he had mentored. This was his routine, his space, his life. He had worked at Harborview for 9 years. He had saved lives, taught residents, supervised interns, and built a reputation that meant something. But none of that mattered the moment Stanton set her eyes on him. Before we move further, where are you watching from? If you're seeing this for the first time, please subscribe. Stories like these, stories about injustice and bias, need to be shared. Your support ensures they reach the people who need to hear them. Stanton had joined the Seattle Police Department 6 years earlier. 3 of those years had been on patrol. Her record was mixed. She had diligence, but she also had repeated complaints of profiling professionals of color. An attorney detained in his courthouse. A chef was questioned in his restaurant. A doctor stopped in a parking garage. Every complaint had been dismissed with the same reasoning. Insufficient evidence, additional training recommended, boxes checked. Stanton attended the trainings, nodded along, and went back to her assumptions. That evening, she had been assigned to hospital patrol. Reports of unauthorized individuals in restricted areas had increased. She was walking the corridor when a nurse, a young white woman named Brittany Matthews, mentioned seeing someone she didn't recognize near the medication storage. Did they have ID? Stanton asked. I think so, Brittany said. But he looked. I don't know. Maybe new. Better safe than sorry, Stanton said. And with that, her mind formed the narrative. Black man in scrubs, possibly impersonating staff, possibly dangerous. Never mind the hospital ID that anyone in their right mind could see. Never mind the confidence of a professional who belonged. She saw only the threat she expected. Andrew was almost at the ER entrance when he felt the presence behind him. Sir, excuse me, sir, Stanton called. He turned, assuming someone needed help. Instead, he saw a uniformed officer. He went into professional mode immediately. What's the emergency? He asked. I need to see some identification, Stanton said, hand near her duty belt. Andrew gestured to his chest. My hospital ID. Dr. Andrew Bennett, emergency medicine. Stanton barely looked. I need a driver's license or state ID. Andrew's eyebrows lifted. Can I ask what this is about? I'm heading to my shift. There have been reports of unauthorized individuals. I need to verify who you are. Andrew's patience snapped. He pulled out his wallet, displaying his driver's license and medical license alongside his hospital ID. Here, all of it. Now can I go do my job? Stanton scrutinized them, her gaze unyielding. These could be fake. Andrew stared, disbelief written on his face. Fake? Multiple IDs? Are you serious? They impersonate staff all the time, she said coldly. Andrew gestured around the hallway. Nurses, doctors, and staff were watching. Ask anyone here. I've worked here 9 years. Ask them. Stanton shook her head. That doesn't matter. You're coming with me. Andra's voice rose, steady and measured, but laced with outrage. I'm a doctor. I work here. I'm literally wearing my hospital ID. Buddy, at this point, I don't care. You are coming with me, Stanton replied, dismissive. Andrew felt the weight of humiliation before he even put his hands behind his back. Is it because I'm black? He asked, his voice quiet, but piercing. Maybe, Stanton admitted. Go ahead, slowly turn around and put your hands behind your back. Witnesses had stopped. Colleagues, patients, visitors, everyone stared. A resident he had mentored, Dr. Lauren Mills, rushed over. Dr. Bennett, what's happening? Step back, Stanton said, her hand already reaching for handcuffs. He's an attending physician. You can't do this, Dr. Mills insisted. I need you to step away, Stanton said, her jaw tight. Deshaun Mitchell, the hospital security supervisor, an older man who had worked there for 15 years, approached. Officer, that's Dr. Bennett. He's been here since before I started. What's the problem? Stanton's face hardened. Turn around, she repeated. Andrew complied slowly, handcuffs clicking shut. The corridor went silent. Some nurses started to cry. Others pulled out phones to record. Patients looked on in confusion. I am complying under protest, Andrew said, his voice carrying. I am Dr. Andrew Bennett, attending physician. This is my workplace. This officer just admitted race as a factor in my detention. Everyone here is a witness. The officer led him down the hallway toward the security office. Each step intensified the absurdity, the injustice. Staff whispered. Patients stared. The sound of handcuffs echoed against tile floors that had seen trauma and tragedy every day, but never this. By the time they reached the security office, the hospital administrator on duty, Mariana Cruz, was already there. Her face turned pale as she saw Andrew handcuffed. What are you doing? She demanded. I'm verifying identity, Stanton said, her voice clipped. On what grounds? Cruz pressed. He's wearing a hospital ID. His colleagues vouched for him. This is insane. Andrew spoke calmly. I am Dr. Andrew Bennett. I work here. This is my shift. You're humiliating me because of assumptions, not evidence. Cruz looked at Stanton. Remove the handcuffs. Now. Stanton hesitated, then unlocked them. Andrew rubbed his wrists, jaw clenched, emotions seething beneath the surface. Within minutes, the story would ripple through the hospital. Video would surface. Witnesses would speak. And a moment that began with a single assumption would set the stage for a $2.4 million lawsuit, a ruined career, and a national conversation about bias, policing, and professional respect. But that moment, the hallway where Dr. Bennett had been handcuffed, would be remembered first. The shock, the humiliation, and the realization that credentials, experience, and years of service did not shield him from racial profiling. By the next morning, the incident at Harborview Medical Center had exploded beyond the hospital walls. Staff were still talking about it in hushed voices, many replaying the video Dr. Lauren Mills had captured on her phone. Patients who had witnessed the scene called family members to describe seeing a doctor handcuffed in his own workplace. Some were outraged. Some were simply confused. But almost everyone was shaken. Andrew Bennett sat in his office, staring at his laptop. The video had already been uploaded to internal hospital channels, and news alerts were starting to trickle in. He rubbed his wrists where the handcuffs had left red marks, feeling a combination of pain, anger, and disbelief. 9 years of dedication, decades of hard work, reduced to a humiliating moment in a corridor, all because a police officer couldn't see past her bias. Across town, Officer Rebecca Stanton had been placed on administrative leave. She was quietly packing her things at the precinct, muttering about procedures and reports. But she knew, deep down, that this wasn't about protocol. It was about her own inability to question the assumptions she had carried with her since the academy. Meanwhile, the hospital moved quickly. Mariana Cruz, the administrator on duty, called an emergency staff meeting. Key personnel from security, administration, and public relations were assembled. "This is unacceptable," Cruz said, voice firm. "We cannot allow any professional, especially our doctors, to be treated this way. Our staff must be protected, and our patients must see trust in action. We are filing formal complaints and cooperating fully with law enforcement oversight." Deshaun Mitchell, the security supervisor, nodded in agreement. "We've had complaints in the past about Officer Stanton questioning staff unnecessarily. But this, handcuffing Dr. Bennett in front of patients, this is extreme. I've documented everything. Witness statements, timelines, video evidence, it's all here." Dr. Bennett had returned to his rounds cautiously, speaking with nurses and residents, trying to reassure them that he was fine, even while they whispered about the injustice. He could see the impact on the staff. Nurses hesitant to ask for help, residents visibly shaken, and colleagues questioning whether the hospital was safe for staff of color. By midday, local news channels were running stories. Seattle doctor detained at own hospital. Black physician handcuffed during shift. Police officer accused of racial profiling. The video, showing Andrew complying under protest while Officer Stanton ignored clear identification, went viral. Social media lit up with outrage. Doctors across the country shared similar experiences, being questioned in their workplaces, having their credentials doubted, and being treated as intruders in spaces they had earned. Within hours, civil rights attorneys reached out to Andrew. Among them was Lydia Carter, a veteran lawyer specializing in civil rights cases. She called him personally. "Dr. Bennett, I've seen the footage. What happened is not only unlawful, it's blatant racial profiling. You have multiple witnesses, video evidence, and documented credentials. We can hold the department and Officer Stanton accountable," she said. Andrew's voice was calm but firm. "I just want accountability. I don't want anyone else to go through this. I want policies changed so that officers don't see professionals as suspects just because of their race." Carter paused, letting the gravity sink in. This could be a major case. The damages could reach millions, and it could set a precedent for how hospitals and police departments handle verified professionals. Back at the precinct, Lieutenant David Kwan, a supervisor who had worked with the hospital for years, reviewed the incident. He watched the video multiple times, noting every detail. Stanton ignoring multiple forms of ID, handcuffing Andrew, and dismissing witness testimony. He shook his head in disbelief. "This isn't about procedure. It's about bias. And it's egregious," Kwan muttered to himself. He immediately called for a formal internal review and recommended termination proceedings for Stanton. Meanwhile, Stanton sat in a quiet room, her hands folded in front of her. The gravity of what she had done was beginning to settle. But she was defensive. She had always seen herself as meticulous, careful, and cautious. She believed she had done her duty. And yet, now, the entire city was watching, the hospital was condemning her, and her career hung by a thread. At Harborview, Andrew faced his colleagues in the emergency department. Dr. Mills approached him, voice low but urgent. "Andrew, I'm so sorry. I had no idea it would escalate like this," she said. "You did the right thing by recording it," he replied quietly. "We need proof. Without that, this could have been swept under the rug, and no one would have believed me. People think credentials are enough, but they're not. Not for everyone." The tension escalated further when the Seattle Police Department released a statement. They condemned the detention but stopped short of fully acknowledging racial profiling. The wording was careful. "We are investigating the circumstances surrounding the detention of a medical professional at Harborview Medical Center. We are reviewing all reports and video evidence." Public outrage grew. Protesters gathered outside the hospital. Medical organizations demanded immediate action. Editorials ran in national newspapers. The doctor can't breathe. Hospitals aren't safe from bias. A badge isn't enough. Racial profiling in professional spaces. Police accountability starts with every officer who assumes a black professional must prove themselves. By the end of the day, the lawsuit had been filed. Ander, represented by Lydia Carter, named Officer Stanton, the Seattle Police Department, and the hospital administration for failing to prevent the incident. Allegations included unlawful detention, racial profiling, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and violation of civil rights. The first press conference was tense. Carter spoke clearly. Dr. Bennett was handcuffed in front of colleagues and patients despite multiple forms of identification and witness confirmation. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a decision driven by bias. Reporters pressed Ander for comment. He looked directly into the cameras. I went to medical school. I completed residency. I've worked in this hospital for 9 years. I've saved lives and taught students. None of that protected me from being treated like a criminal because someone couldn't see past their assumptions about my race. The hospital responded with an apology, promising internal reforms. But Ander wasn't satisfied with words. He wanted structural change. Policies were drafted requiring officers to confirm credentials with supervisors before detaining any hospital staff. Mandatory implicit bias training was announced. But the question lingered. How many other professionals had endured similar treatment without video evidence or witnesses? Meanwhile, Stanton faced intense scrutiny. Internal Affairs compiled a report detailing her prior complaints, her decision-making, and the video evidence. Her actions were deemed inexcusable. Termination proceedings began, and the local union tried to defend her, but even they could not counter the overwhelming evidence. That evening, Ander sat in the quiet of his office. He reflected on the events, the humiliation, the anger, the disbelief, and the sudden national attention. But he also thought about responsibility. Not just his own, but society's. Policies could change, but bias persisted. And bias could destroy careers, lives, and trust. He drafted a statement for the media. Short, clear, and to the point. This is about respect, fairness, and ensuring that professionals of color are not treated as suspects in their own workplaces. Today, it was me. Tomorrow, it could be someone else. We must do better. Even as the storm began to unfold, Ander knew the fight had only just started. Officer Stanton's career was in jeopardy, the hospital's reputation was under attack, and the city faced potential liability in the millions. But most importantly, he had to face the reality that despite clear evidence and credentials, racial assumptions could still endanger anyone. And in the quiet moments, he thought about his patients, his students, and his colleagues, the ones who had seen him handcuffed and humiliated, and knew that the ripple effects of that moment would be felt for years. Weeks after the incident, the city of Seattle was still reeling. Media coverage intensified, drawing attention to systemic issues of bias in law enforcement, even in professional settings. Dr. Ander Bennett had become a reluctant public figure, called upon for interviews, panel discussions, and testimony before city councils. Yet every time he recounted what happened, the memories returned, walking down that hospital corridor, handcuffed, with witnesses staring in disbelief, patients watching, and Officer Stanton refusing to see the truth. The legal process moved swiftly. Civil rights attorneys filed a federal lawsuit against Officer Rebecca Stanton, the Seattle Police Department, and the city. The claims were extensive. Racial profiling, unlawful detention, violation of civil rights, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and failure to properly train officers. Every piece of evidence was damning. Video footage from Dr. Mills's phone, witness statements from multiple hospital staff, and Ander's medical credentials that left no doubt about his identity. The city's legal team quickly realized the case was indefensible. They attempted mediation, but Ander's attorneys were firm. This was about accountability, systemic change, and compensation for the humiliation and emotional trauma suffered. Negotiations dragged on, with tension escalating daily. The story had reached national headlines, and public pressure mounted. Editorials condemned the incident as a glaring example of how bias could override reason, even when credentials were visible. Officer Stanton remained under suspension, her future uncertain. Attempts to defend her actions centered on protocols and investigative diligence, but the video and multiple witness accounts left little room for argument. Stanton herself became increasingly isolated, struggling with the realization that her decisions had consequences beyond her control. Inside the courtroom, Andrew's presence was steady. He was asked to testify about the incident. "I've been a physician for 9 years at Harborview," he began, his voice calm but resolute. "I've treated thousands of patients, supervised residents, and built a career based on expertise, trust, and care. Yet, on October 2nd, I was handcuffed in my own workplace, in front of colleagues and patients, by an officer who admitted, verbally, that my race factored into her actions. This is not an isolated event. It's part of a systemic problem where people of color are assumed to be imposters until proven otherwise." Questions from the defense attorney were sharp. "Dr. Bennett, is it not possible that Officer Stanton was simply cautious and following protocol?" Andrew met her gaze. "I had 3 forms of identification and colleagues vouching for me, and I was in my own workplace. There was no threat, no emergency, no crime. Caution doesn't explain handcuffing a doctor for 9 minutes while dismissing all evidence of his identity. That's bias, plain and simple." Witnesses added corroborating testimony. Dr. Mills described recording the handcuffing, noting the officer ignored visible identification. Dishon Mitchell recounted how multiple staff members confirmed Andrew's role as an attending physician, yet Stanton persisted. The narrative was clear. Racial profiling had directly led to unlawful detention. Media coverage amplified every testimony. Videos went viral again, this time showing not only Stanton's actions, but also the hospital's response, including administrators demanding the cuffs be removed. Social media erupted. Thousands of people shared similar experiences of being questioned in workplaces despite visible credentials: teachers, doctors, lawyers, and executives. The case became more than just Andrew's story. It became a national discussion about professional spaces, authority, and racial bias. The city decided settlement was the most strategic option. In formal negotiations, the figure was set at $2.4 million, a combination of compensation for emotional trauma, reputational harm, and a statement that such behavior would not be tolerated. Andrew, understanding the importance of the precedent, donated a portion of the funds to organizations focused on healthcare equity and police accountability. Officer Stanton faced her final disciplinary hearing. The report was thorough and damning. 7 prior complaints involving racial profiling, repeated failures to heed training, and the Harborview incident as the most egregious example. The termination letter was direct. Officer Stanton engaged in racial profiling and unlawful detention of a medical professional in his workplace. Despite clear identification and multiple witness confirmations, she handcuffed and detained Dr. Bennett without justification. Her actions violated department policy, state law, and federal civil rights protections. Her employment is terminated immediately. Stanton attempted to appeal, but union support quickly evaporated under public scrutiny and overwhelming evidence. She issued a brief statement. "I made a serious error in judgment. I failed to properly assess the situation and caused harm to Dr. Bennett and the hospital community. I take full responsibility." The statement did little to repair her reputation. Her career was effectively over, her name added to the National Decertification Index, ensuring she could never serve as a police officer again. The Seattle Police Department underwent intense review. Internal Affairs investigated why Stanton had remained on patrol despite multiple prior complaints. Findings revealed a pattern. Complaints had been minimized, Training programs were ineffective, and supervisors avoided confronting uncomfortable truths about bias. Reforms followed. Mandatory implicit bias training, specifically for hospital and professional environments, real-time review of all detentions in such spaces, and creation of a dedicated oversight unit empowered to act on discrimination complaints. For Andrew, the settlement and reforms were important, but the personal impact lingered. He reflected on the patients who had seen him handcuffed, the residents and medical students who had witnessed a senior physician humiliated, and the colleagues who had to navigate the chaos. No amount of money could erase the memory of that corridor, but justice in the form of accountability and systemic change offered some solace. He also realized his role as an advocate. In interviews, he was precise. "I went to medical school, completed residency, practiced emergency medicine for 9 years, and still was treated like a criminal in my own hospital. The goal is to prevent this from happening to anyone else. Professionals of color must be able to work without proving their legitimacy every day." Hospitals across the country took notice. Policies were revised to prevent similar incidents. Security personnel received specific guidance on verifying credentials without relying on assumptions about race. The case was cited in medical journals and legal reviews, demonstrating how implicit bias could turn routine professional oversight into discriminatory and traumatizing encounters. Months later, Andrew returned to the same corridors where he had been handcuffed. Staff greeted him with respect and support, but he noticed subtle changes in behavior. Colleagues making sure new hires felt welcome. Administrators emphasizing training on bias, and security protocols prioritizing verification over assumption. The hospital had learned, but the lesson came at a heavy cost. For Stanton, the fallout was permanent. She was no longer an officer, and her attempts to rebuild her career in law enforcement failed. Public perception was unforgiving. Training sessions and disciplinary hearings could not undo the harm caused. Her story became an example of what happens when bias, unchecked, overrides procedure and humanity. Andrew's message to the world was clear. Credentials should be sufficient. Expertise should be respected. And bias should never dictate who is treated as a criminal in their own workplace. The $2.4 million settlement was symbolic, yes, but more importantly, it was a marker of accountability, a warning, and a step toward meaningful reform. And yet, he knew the work was ongoing. Policies could be written. Training could be mandated. Officers could be monitored. But the cultural shift, the deep understanding that assumptions about race cannot govern professional judgment, would take longer. That was a battle Andrew was committed to, using his voice, his experience, and his story to ensure that no other doctor, nurse, or professional of color would have to endure what he had suffered. The handcuffs were gone, but the memory remained. What changed, however, was the world around him. Hospitals reviewed policies, police departments adjusted protocols, and professionals across industries began speaking out. The moment of injustice had sparked a movement for accountability and respect, proving that even a single act of bias could catalyze systemic change. And for Dr. Andrew Bennett, that was the ultimate measure of justice.